And we're hot, guys. And we're hot. We'll give it a few minutes. We're in the share around segment. Alan, I was just briefing you on the share around segment, so bear with us as we get through it in our 0 followers. I suspect, Kenny, as the daylight gets longer here in the north and the weather gets warmer, people are going to be staying outside a little bit longer. So
yeah,
it may
it's the same here.
What's that?
It's the same here.
Yeah. Yep. Let me go to the comments because typically I don't see a podcast. What do you mean, Terry? Yes, you do. Terry, we're on right now. Yeah, we're on. Mullins Dog Tracking just shared it.
Yep. And I am. Yeah, it shows us live because
we're hot. We're hot. Alan, I was telling Kenny we need like some Jeopardy music or something to play during this time.
Yeah. Pick some of your favorites, Matt.
I will. I think you and I have a very similar taste in music, buddy.
Yeah. Well, we both ride, so I would say you're spot on.
I didn't know you rode. You do?
Yep. My Ultra's in the barn as we speak. Still on the lift, but it'll be down here shortly.
You've got an Ultra too?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to come over and we're gonna have to go for a ride, man. I didn't know that. I just took mine Saturday. I put my garage in summer mode.
I like it.
Took it out of the cover, got it off the dolly, and I put new shocks on it, so I got to adjust the shocks. But
I like it.
Yeah, fun stuff, man. All right, hold on a second here. Getting myself distracted knowing that Alan rides an Ultra, Kenny, and I can't get stuff shared around either.
Yeah, I'm still sharing myself.
You get in Wounded Game? Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah, you did. I'm just gonna throw it into Michigan stuff then. I'll throw in some Bloodhound stuff. People like Bloodhound stuff, Kenny.
Some people do.
Well,
and there's the smart ones in the world.
You'll notice, Alan, we have a lot of fun bantering about breeds. None of us are breed snobs, but except Kenny.
I like the ones that work best.
Yeah, those are the best ones, the one that work best, right?
Yeah, 100%.
All right. Don't see a podcast. All right, guys, here we go. Thank you to those who are following. Brian Bankel, hello. Ethan Young, hi, buddy. Hi, buddy. Can you give me the green light? We'll let the music play, man.
All right, I'm ready.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Alan, we're getting ready to knock this all apart, brother. Here we go.
Sounds good.
Going on here. Hello, loyal fans and potential newcomers. Welcome to the ABTA Tuesday Night Live, joined today by friend, fellow MDTN member, and Michigan tracker Alan Perry, and the usual suspect, Kenny Mullins. Alan, how are you, buddy?
Great. Thanks for having me, guys. Really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, man, no problem. I was thrilled when you willing to jump on. We sometimes it's really hard to get people lined up. We try to get some other, a wide breadth of people, and it's hard to get schedules coordinated. So by you coming on really was great, and I know it's gonna be great content too, just because I know you. So
I appreciate it. No, thanks. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it'll be a fun conversation. Kenny, what's up, man?
Another day in paradise. Ready to talk tracking.
Bring on paradise, man. Aren't we always ready to talk tracking? Is there ever a time that you're not ready to talk tracking? No. I think most of us are always ready and willing to talk about tracking somehow. That's what happens when it's a compulsive disorder. And I think for a lot of us, it borders line on a compulsive disorder when we live and breathe it, particularly like Kenny Mullins, who's all over the place, training dogs to track, captaining the ship of the ABTA and captaining the ship.
You're looking at 8 messages of people asking for training help that I got to get to tonight.
Yeah, cool. Well, Alan, thanks again, man. We're like I said, this is just going to be a fun conversation. It's just 3 guys talking tracking. Let me flip back to the comments so I don't miss stuff. We'll see what the viewer engagement turns out to be, but we just let these conversations flow on their own merit and end on its own merit. If we're having conversation and good engagement, we roll. If it's run its course, it's run its course, and that's okay too. So,
and sometimes it goes way off course. Like we were going to talk about testing, deep dive into the testing, and the comments started coming in and went a different direction. We just said, "Hey, we're rolling with it."
And it turned out to be a great 2-hour stream. So that's what's great about the public engagement. We did get the testing, the core of the testing stuff we wanted to cover in, but it was good stuff. But before we dive in, let's just remind people of the events that are coming up. So remember, folks, we have the Alabama event. Kenny, what's the date on that? Do you remember off the top of your head?
May 3rd. Does that sound right?
Okay, so Alabama event, early May 3rd, seminar and testing. The Pennsylvania event, May 30 to June 1, I think, in Pennsylvania. That is a seminar and testing event. Then June 28th is the Michigan event. It's a 1-day seminar. We're working to accommodate testing, although it's not a formal testing event. We're working to accommodate testing there. We have a potential of 14, depending, but that's in flux. Those of you interested in testing in Michigan, we will follow up with you on how many we can really accommodate and the level of tests we can accommodate, depending on judges and depending on property availability. We are working on all of that. And then last but not least, currently on the books is the Iowa event in September. Can you have those dates right handy? Do you remember? If you don't, that's okay.
Yeah, it's September 13th is 12th through the 14th, but the 13th is the day of the seminar.
Okay. So also a seminar and testing event. All of those events, registration is open on the ABTA website. Go to the website, American Blood Trackers Association.org. Go to events. You can scroll through, find the event. You can also register you can register for the event there. You can also book a test online. So just a friendly reminder that in order to test, you must be an ABTA member. So if you are planning to test at any of these events or a private test anytime in between, please sign up, register as a member. The membership fee is $25 a year. There are some member benefits. That video with that opening video banner that we played with the great music played over it, those are the organizations that have partnered with us and are offering ABTA members discounts, and discount codes are also available on the ABTA website on the members page. Did I miss anything, Kenny? I've said a lot amount.
Nope. I think we're ready to roll.
Ready to roll. So I'm going to so Alan, one thing that probably is worth talking about usually on these lives, I'm the loudmouth and of course the pretty face.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that will remain true today.
AKA pretty voice.
Kenny tends to be the brains of the operation, and I go, "Oh yeah, yeah, okay, no, that's cool." And then I throw a question out there that he looks at me like, "Why did you ask me that?" I'm like, But yeah, in all seriousness, Alan, appreciate you coming on. It's just a free flow conversation, and we'll turn the line. The interrogation over to Kenny Mullins. Captain Mullins will be conducting the interrogation.
So Alan, we'll start off. How long you been tracking?
This just concluded our 8th season. So we're working. We're already preparing for our 9th year tracking this coming fall. So
what led you into tracking?
Wow, great question. So I go back so we picked up Hunter in January of 2017. 2 years prior to that, I always say that is really what changed my life. Hit the biggest deer I've ever shot at. Knew it wasn't a great shot, but proverbial story, right? For any of us who've tracked, had blood for about 200 yards and then it petered out. A buddy of mine, John Fernandez, had said, "Hey, I heard there's guys that track wounded deer with dogs." Got a hold of, in the area that we were hunting, had property up near Ludington, got a hold of Dan and Angie Cluley, who are on the west side of the state here in Michigan.
Yep.
And they were gracious enough to come on out and track. And sure enough, 600 yards later, jumped the deer, jumped him twice more after that, determined that he was just too healthy of a deer. He was gonna live. He was gonna make it. But I was so blown away from the process, in watching the process, watching Gunner work that day, that I said, man, if you guys ever have pups from that boy right there, I said, I want in. And Dan said, I remember it vividly. He said, well, just keep in mind, he said, when that day comes, it'll be great. But he said, you'll be doing more tracking than you do hunting.
Yep.
2 years later, we got Gunner. Gunner's the father. We got Hunter in January of 2017, and never truer word spoken.
I did not know that Hunter you got from Dan and Angie.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And with as many years as I've had him, and with as great a tracking dog as he is, I've always said, if I could have 50% of Gunner, I'm totally good. Because his genes are that good. They produced some, both with Hunter and Scout. Scout's our second dog, which we picked up in February of 22 as a backup. Got talking with Linda, who's my partner in this whole tracking thing, my wife. We said, at some point, Hunter's going to get older. He's going to decline. If we're going to still do this, we need a second dog. And in February of 2022, we picked up our second dog. So I basically got into it out of necessity in needing a tracking dog, but was just so blown away by the entire process and by the way that Gunner worked. I was hooked and have never looked back. I hunt a lot less, but that's
so. Okay. Is that what led you to tracking for the public? That incident, or were you just planning on doing it for just yourself? Is there a moment that you realized, hey, I want to help others?
Yeah. So, initially when we got them, I knew that there was a whole training thing. And back then, so that was back in 2017, I knew that much about tracking, nothing. I can say when I first started out, and it's funny the advice I had gotten, because really Dan and Angie were the only two that I had known at the time, and they said, "You'll figure it out. You're going to drag some leg, you're going to train." I grabbed some books, I read some books, and I just got to a point where I said, "You know what? You're gonna figure this out. You're gonna go through the school of hard knocks, and you're just gonna figure it out, and you're gonna learn your dog. You're gonna make some mistakes." I will say that we work extremely hard. Practice, repetition aids learning, right? So in training, those practice tracks, never took one for granted. And basically over the years, you gain a lot of advice from a lot of other trackers, but it's initially it's
Good
just
and
trial.
bad.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You look, you got to figure it out yourself. There's a significant portion. I learned early on, and I'm laughing as I say this because the fall of 2017, I learned an extremely valuable lesson. One of which guys had told me that I would learn in time. I didn't realize how quickly it would become. They told me, look, when you get into this, when you get into the whole tracking thing, you've got to trust your dog. And I heard that, and of course it went in one ear and out the other. It wasn't his first track, but he tracked for my deer that I had shot later on that fall. And sure enough, just like most trackers and a young pup, I didn't trust him. I restarted him 5 times. On the 6th restart, he refused. He just laid down. And here I am on my knees, having a conversation with my dog about, okay, look, let's do this one more time, and I'll do it your way. I'll trust you. And lo and behold, shortly thereafter, he finds my deer. So that was, I learned a very valuable lesson early on with as much training and as much practice as we had gone through, that when you're put in the heat of the moment, you really do got to trust your dog. You gotta know his ins and outs. You gotta be able to read him, right? You gotta be able to, reading your dog is crucial to developing that partnership. And so that's how so early on, I had basically just decided that, I wanted to train, and yes, I would offer services to the public, but really didn't think about jumping in, with both feet into the water and getting into the network. Shortly thereafter, Dan and Angie said, hey, this guy's working really, really hard with this dog, with this pup. And, so they vouched for me. Michigan Deer Trackers Network took me in, and pretty much the rest is history. So, it's a whole different aspect, a whole different animal. And, and I was told when I got into it, hey, if you enjoy hunting, don't get yourself a tracking dog, because you'll hunt less. And never two words spoken, but I don't regret that, not one bit.
Me neither, buddy.
Yeah, I used to be a very avid hunter, and I rarely go. Every year I say I'm going to, and then the phone starts ringing, and that goes. Yeah. So let's dive into the tracking process. Yeah. When a hunter calls you, what kind of information do you need from them?
So over the years, I've been accused by some other guys, jokingly, of course, of not necessarily over communicating, but over screening my calls. I screen probably more in depth. In fact, there are times Linda's in the background and she'll be waving to me like this. She'll just say, look, take the track, or, because I screen and ask so many questions. So the process for me, once the call comes in, is give me as much information as they possibly can. I want to know, is it tree stand? Is it ground blind? How far was the shot? How far do they think the shot was? Was it elevated? Was it ground blind? In my mind, I'm trying to visualize, did you hit right side of the deer, left side of the deer? I'm trying to visualize based on the evidence that's being supplied to me. I'm trying to visualize the shot, right? Elevated stand, higher the stand, steeper the angle. So I'm trying to visualize based on everything he's telling me. And early on, when we first started tracking, one of Al Sherman's truths is take what the hunter's telling you as to where he thinks he hit it, and then just draw like a 3-foot diameter circle, and the arrow might be within that 3-foot diameter. But again, a lot of the evidence, and I pride myself over the years in being able to read arrows, being able to look at it, looking at the blood. And so I'm trying to create a picture in my mind of what the hunter's telling me, where do I think he thinks he hit it, and does the blood in the arrow support what I'm being told? Do the stories line up?
Yeah.
And if I could tell hunters and give hunters, I'm laughing as I say this because I know Matt and yourself, Kenny, probably know this to be true. All hunters should practice, right? They should get very proficient. But secondly, they should enroll themselves in a photography class and learn how to take pictures. Because as we know, the pictures that we get of arrows, the pictures that we get of blood, the guy's got his camera up here and he's waving it like this, when he takes it, and you're looking at the pictures and you're saying, "Wow, this doesn't help much." I
shared
some of those last week on the live stream that were.
Well, Ken has a whole segment in one of the part of a presentation he does. And when I went to Lancaster too, but when I first met Kenny, although we were chatting before that, but when I went out to Lancaster to the event in Pennsylvania in August, that was a whole segment. He pulled up, was like, "Hey, now we're going to read arrow or look at pictures of blood and arrows." He pulls up this blurry garbage. I'm like, we're all like, "What?" He says, "Yeah, what is it?" Well, he said, "Well, that's how you're going to get it. What are you going to make of it?" It was true, and we kind of walked through a condensed version of that last week, maybe Kenny week. I don't remember, but last week, but it's so true. The photography class is so true. I don't want to derail the conversation, but it was worth mentioning that Kenny does that. And the nice thing about the way Kenny does it is it sparks a ton of conversation. It just gets that conversation going, and everybody's speculating, and people like me are too intimidated to say anything. But so in that case, I was right every single time. That's not true at all.
Well,
but then I'll call out people that I see that are just sitting there being quiet and trying to keep their mouths shut. So I'm like, "Hey, what about you?"
Yeah, you scoundrel.
Yeah, you get those people that just don't want to ask those questions. But when it comes right down to it, look, we're all hunters ourselves, right? And so they get caught up in the moment, and so I get the blurry pictures. I get the I didn't take any pictures of the blood. Okay, so in my mind, Kenny, I'm trying to develop that picture so I can then give the client my advice on where do I think he hit it, do I think it's a lethal shot, do I think it's non-lethal, is it front, is it back? Then I try to explain the shot to him as to what I think. I've often I track by a rule that if I feel there's a 50-50 chance of that deer being dead, I'm going to take that track. And I'm going to tell the client, "Look, it's 50-50. If you're game, I'm game." Because there's, based on the evidence that you're seeing, it could go either way. But there's oftentimes where after I put the picture together, I see the blood, I see the arrow, especially this year. I pride myself in this, in not having to take every track. This year, the clients themselves recovered 12 of the deer, and I never stepped foot on the track. I told them, I said, "Look, well, as much as I'd love to come out, your deer is dead. Here's what we'll do." So I told them what I thought. I told them how far I thought it went. I told them which direction I thought it went. All 12 of them said, I said, "Look, if you can't find it, I'll come out. I'll bring my dog out and we'll get your deer." I said, "But your deer's dead." And was able to get those clients to retrieve their own deer without me ever stepping foot on the track. So I'll give the clients that option. I'll say, "Go out and take a look. And, if you can't find it, I'll come out and we'll find your deer. But I'm telling you, if I'm that confident, I'll say, 'Look, I'm telling you, your deer's dead. Just go find it.'" And, and everybody, yeah.
One of those was the track you and I were talking about. Remember that guy in I think Chelsea wanted to shot it on that island?
Yeah.
Remember that? You go
5 Mile Lake.
5 Mile Lake. I says, "Man, that deer is dead. You got to get in a boat." I'm like, "Oh, I don't." And sure enough, I mean, the deer wasn't about 150 yards or so, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And he found his own deer.
He found it. Yeah, and I told him, I said, "Look, I'll be happy to go for a boat ride." I said, "But you're not going to need me." When he showed me his arrow and showed me all the blood and the evidence, I said, "Look, did you go track?" And he said, "No." I said, "Good, don't." I said, "Trust me on this. Don't even go." He said, "No." So he did say, "No, I didn't even go look." I said, "Perfect." I said, you'll find that deer on your own." And he did.
Yes, he did.
And he called me back, and he's live streaming, right? He's showing me his deer, and I couldn't have been happier for him. And I said, "But look," I said, "if you can't find it, I'll be more than happy to come out and find it for you." I said, because it's dead. I said, your deer's 100% dead. I said, go find it yourself. And he did. So it was great.
Yep.
I get just as much of a thrill out of that in helping a guy and not going out. And every one of those guys, I'm going to hold your phone number, if I ever need you. And I said, look, I always tell clients, look, if I don't ever hear from you again, I'm not going to take it personal. So, that's totally okay.
Yeah.
But,
That's what I tell people too.
I get just as much of a kick out of finding somebody's deer without ever having to go out on the track. So
let me ask you this. You talked about, looking at the arrow, looking at the blood. So besides the blood, what other signs are you and your dog looking for on the trail?
Yeah. So, once I get out there and I started to hit sight, I'm watching how hunters working or scouts working, whichever dog I happen to be running that day. I look at their body language. And again, keep in mind, I'm reliving all the shot scenario, right? And all the potential shot scenarios that are running through my mind. But I'm really watching the way my dog's working. If I've got blood, and we don't always have it, but when I do have it, I look for the height of the blood. Is it high up on the weeds? Is it knee high? Is it waist high? What is it telling me? Is it smeared? Is it drops? So does that line up with the picture that I've created based on where I believe the deer was hit? Am I seeing it on the right side? Am I seeing it on the left side? Was it a pass through? Was it not a pass through? So I'm creating and building on that scenario as I'm running my dogs as well. So a lot of times, I'll look at indentation of the track. Later on in the season, when we get a little bit of moisture, I'll look for kicked up leaves. I'll look to see if he's dragging a leg or not dragging a leg. Am I seeing that kind of sign within the track? Am I seeing it in the leaves? So the whole time I'm out there, in my mind, I'm building that scenario based on, again, am I seeing blood? Am I not seeing blood? But does everything still line up with the way I'm seeing hunter or scout work? Does it line up with how they're acting? Where their head position is, where their tail, what's their body language telling me? I know when the hunter starts kind of going in the search mode, and it's kind of lining up with my 50-50 theory of, this may just be a live deer, may not be lethally hit, based on he'll backtrack. It's uncanny, and I'll call out to the hunter who's generally behind me. A lot of times he's with Linda. He'll be 20 or 30 yards behind me, and Hunter will actually restart and backtrack to last known good evidence or last known real good scent. And I'll call out, I've already been by this tree twice, or I've already been by the same log 3 times. And I'll call it out, and I call it out for a reason, because as we start to move away, I'll have them move up to look a little bit closer to see, did we miss something? Do they see some sign there? So the whole time I'm out on the track and we're still tracking, I'm still building sort of that scenario, that the picture of where it doesn't line up with what I've been told, at least at this point. So constantly building that picture.
Okay. So what tools of the track do you take with you?
So that's where and I laugh because a lot of guys. So all I carry a taser versus a pistol for protection of myself and my dog, in case we jump a live deer, in case we get up on a live deer, and that's just strictly in defense of ourselves. I'm lucky enough and fortunate enough. My wife goes on every track with us. She'll call herself this. So she calls herself a pack mule. So she carries all our water. She carries any peroxide that we might have, any bandages and everything. It's in her pack, and she takes it. I myself will basically just have my taser and my phone, and I use my Onyx so that if they holler out, "Hey, you're coming up on a property line," I'll call Hunter to sit, and then I can take a look at my phone to see where the property lines are at. But I'm very, very fortunate, and I don't personally have to carry as much as she does, and I do feel for her sometimes. But she carries most of everything that will take on a track. So I can kind of free up. We track on lead, so we don't track off lead. So wherever Hunter goes, I go.
So I got to ask.
Go ahead.
I got to cut you off for a minute. What are you doing with the taser?
So I have had to defend ourselves once. Came up and jumped a live deer. He turned to us, made a slight advancement. So all I do at that point, so I felt it was important enough for me to. So my taser has a cartridge, so it can dispense the cartridge, just like you see in some of the videos and some of the police officers. So I tased the deer so that the client could get in to dispatch the animal in a more controlled fashion, up close. We actually came up on the deer much closer than I anticipated. I didn't expect him to be where he was, but he was, and he was very much alive. And when he turned and started making the aggressive moves towards us, even though I'm backing Hunter off, I felt it was necessary for me at that point to at least put the whole situation for myself and the clients in a more safe situation. So I dispatched a taser at that point so he could come in and dispatch. Do I believe he would have tried to pin me or the dog down? I didn't want to find out. It was really close. So those are split seconds decisions as a tracker that you have to make. So for me, it's a non-lethal means of still allowing the client to dispatch in a more safer and controlled situation.
So I got to say, I got to say, this is just my personal opinion, and it's okay if you don't agree with it, but I don't think the hunter dispatching is ever safe.
I've seen so many and talked to so many guys. 100%, Kenny, it isn't safe. I personally don't even like when the hunter has the weapon of season on him. I'm always, hey, don't knock an arrow. Keep that arrow in the quiver. Don't load the gun, even if it's during gun season. To your point, to me, you can't be too safe. There is no such thing.
Because I mean, and it's not that they're bad people or that most of the time they're just so amped up and they don't even realize what they're doing until they've done it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to address that. I mean, everyone can make their own decision, but I have to promote the safest way that I know. But again,
we're hamstrung by our state. So Corey Greiner says, "You lost me there. I'm dispatching the deer." And I get it. Alan and I have talked about the taser thing quite a bit. In just Michigan, the tracker cannot legally do it other than in.
I know, and that's crazy.
I know. That will be, I think, the next movement. We had the big movement to get off lead, and it was successful. It took a while, but we got it. And I think the next movement will be organized movement will be tractor dispatch.
Yeah, that needs to happen for sure. So going in a different direction, Alan, tell us about the most difficult or challenging track you've been on. Whether it's challenging as far as dog work, trailing, or challenging with the people.
So our farthest recovery, our longest track, was a gentleman, Raymond, who was down in Monroe County. And this was actual distance. This wasn't just zigzagging through the woods. We tracked the deer 5.2 miles on a one lung and recovered it. We basically ran him down to exhaustion where, once again, the hunter could get up close enough and dispatch. That was our longest. Was it the most difficult? No. So as a tracker, we all know our dog's abilities, but as handlers, we have a part in it as well. There are times where the dogs need our help as much as we always need their help. But there are times where, their Hunter, who's my lead dog, this will be his ninth season. I know when he needs my help, he's actually going to look back at me. He'll stop and he'll look over his shoulder at me. That's when I know he's looking to me to maybe help him out. Couple tracks that come up to mind. We tracked down in Saline, Michigan here, right near the Saline River. Deer crossed the river one time. And those types of things don't ever bother me. This was in November of that same year. The river was extremely swollen. We had 2 previous days of nothing but rain. River was real deep. What made that track even more memorable was the fact that I didn't have my waders with me that day. I generally have them in the truck. One of Dave's buddies, Dave was the hunter. Dave had a pair of his wife's waders in his truck, and he said, I said, I'll wear them. It's better than going across that river. And the river was every bit of waist deep, if not even a little bit more in a couple areas. But I knew I had to get across the river on the other side. So I put his wife's waders on, waded across, and then tracked it another 3/4 of a mile in flooded timber. I know at the time Dave turned to me and he said, what do you think? And I said, shh. I said, Hunter's figuring this out. Now, we tracked for at least a half a mile of that in water that was knee deep on me. And I said, he's not giving up. Hunter zigzagged through this flooded timber and eventually worked his way out of the timber onto a runway and was headed back to the river. Well, once he got onto this runway, he was off to the races. Now, we have 2 basset hounds. And you wouldn't think that basset hounds can move as quickly as they can, but trust me, it's everything that I can do to try to keep up with him when he's.
Oh yeah, I've trained some.
when he's full tilt. So he runs. So I holler out to Dave and his buddy that was with him. I yelled out. I said, he's on it again. And then partially, probably another 50, 60 yards down that runway as we're headed back towards the river, I seen a drop of blood. I hollered out to him that I had blood. Those guys kind of got excited again. That runway took us right back to the river again. And Dave, the hunter, says to me, he says, do you think he went across? I said, there's no doubt in my mind. In Hunter, bassets aren't the best swimmers, but Hunter's wanting to go across that river. I mean, he's pulling. It's everything I can do to hold on to him to keep him from jumping in the water. So I asked his partner, I said, hey, can you wade across and tell me, do you see any tracks going up the bank on that far side? He said, sure. So he waded across. He looks back. He said, no, there's no fresh tracks on this side. And I turned to Dave and I said, hot dog, he didn't make it. He said, what? I said, he didn't make it. He said, what do you mean? I said, he tipped over and he's downstream. I said, let's find the first log jam. I said, he's going to be in the first log jam. He looked at me as though I was absolutely crazy. I said, come on. And I just took off and started running downstream. But another 120 yards downstream, we came up on a log jam. And from the opposite side of the river, I'm scanning the log jam. I seen a little patch of what I believed was deer hide. It was about this big. And it was on the far side, just underneath a log. And I said to Dave, I said, there's your deer. He looked at me like, what? Like I was crazy. I said, do you want to hold Hunter? I said, I'll go across. He said, no, I'll go across. So he waded across, got across the river, and went over to that patch of what I thought was hair. He starts feeling, and he stops. He looks back at me on the bank, doesn't say a word to me, looks back, reaches down, and finally grabs the antlers, and then pulls back and hoists it up. And he starts hooting and hollering.
Nice.
And we recovered him. And the total distance of that was about 2.2 miles when we finally found him caught up in the log jam. But it was one of those tracks that was emotion packed because it was a gargantuan deer. It's one of those that, when you get the opportunity to track one and you find them, that's one that you can't make that stuff up. So here I am in a rented, it wasn't even rented, borrowing a guy's wife's waders, and we find the deer underneath a log jam, which, there's no way he would have ever found it. They would have, it would have rotted underneath there. So, super, super excited when we found that one. Another particular one was, our dogs oftentimes get into really big scent pools. This deer was shot the night before. This was one of those tracks, Kenny, that I got no upside information on. The hunter did not call me to send pictures of an arrow, pictures of blood. He called me to said, "Can you be here in the morning?" And I said, "Yeah, but where do you?" He goes, "No, you don't understand. I'm not asking you to evaluate the shot. I just want to know, will you be here in the morning?" Not knowing what I was getting into, I said yes. Showed up the next morning. We start tracking this deer. As it turns out, it was one lung liver, and he had laid in this. It was kind of like a little valley, and he laid there all night. I still think we kicked him up out of that when we arrived on the scene, and he kind of skirted out of there. But that scent pool was so big. Hunter got in there and could not figure out, because it was in this sort of like a bottom flat, but this bottom flat was 150 to 200 yards across. I mean, it was huge. Ooh. He could not figure it out. We scoured that whole flat. He could not figure out the exit. He started to look confused, and I told the hunter, I said, this is an early morning track. In the morning, thermals rise. I said, so I was asking him about the topography. I said, if we go to the north here and swing around, will that kind of bring us up on a ridge? And I know the thermals are going to rise. I said, I've got to get him out of this scent pool. I've got to get him on to just clean scent, nothing in it. And hopefully the thermals will pick up some of that scent. Lo and behold, we get up as we start making our way across this ridge to the north. Exact same scenario happens. Hunter picks up the scent of this deer. Lo and behold, we find it. And it hadn't been dead all that long. My guess is probably within a half hour.
Oh, wow.
It expired. So it was certainly alive first thing in the morning. But there are times where, as handlers, we got to help our dog, put him in a scenario to succeed the best that we can and the best that we know how. So I knew getting him out of that big scent pool, getting him into clear scent, if he picked up that scent again, he was just going to take off, and that's exactly what happened. So those two really stick out. There's many, many, many more, but those two really stick out as ones where I felt good as a handler.
Yeah, and that's something we should talk about more. Is it's not all about the dog.
Yeah,
we're a team, and honestly, we hold our dogs back more than we realize, both in training and in the field. So that could have easily you could have easily let the dog down because that dog needed your help, and you knew what to do, so it worked out. So we talked about some recoveries.
Yeah.
So now let's talk about some non-recoveries. How do you handle it when you can't recover the deer for the person?
Yeah, even today, there's a couple tracks that really stick out. Look, we're all hunters, so I get asked this a lot. So how do you handle when you take a track, and you tell the hunter, stay out of the woods, don't go out there. You get out there only to find out that they went out there and kind of boogered things up a little bit.
Would you say that's the most common mistake hunters make?
Number one common mistake for me is hunter goes too early. It's not that he's gone, but they go, Kenny, they bump the deer.
And I didn't mean to derail you there. It's just
no. And so that's what happened in this scenario. Had the guy not gone out and tried to find his wife's deer after he called me, by the way, and probably the other reason why that track stands out is because I ended up in water up to my armpits, and then had to go back to the truck and change and continue the track. We didn't find that deer, though I knew that deer was dead. I told him, I said, had you not gone, that deer would have been dead almost exactly where I told him, which was right on the edge of the swamp. But they pushed it. He made his way through it out the other side where I pulled Hunter, and I pulled Hunter for the right reasons. I pulled him because we were entering property that we did not have permission to be on. So I had to pull him. Though he got fired all back up again, and I knew he was on the right trail and on the right runway, but I knew we were on property and had permission. And lo and behold, later on, earlier in that spring, I think it was March or so, he sent me a picture, and about 80 yards from where I pulled Hunter was the dead deer. Was he dead there that day? Yeah, I believe he was. 100%. We just, again, we didn't have permission to be there, and that's relay. So there are some of those that kind of stick with you, but there's a lot of them where and I've told hunters, and we look through the books just this past year, and we got 12 calls back to us when I said, your deer's going to show back up on camera, and the hunters were nice enough to send us pictures, and the deer did show back up on camera. So those confirmations are good for me. They help align the picture that I've created on where I think the shot scenario is, but they've really helped me even get better at, was I off where I thought the deer was hit? And so did I misread the arrow? Did I misread the situation? That sort of thing. So those seem to stick with me equally. If I feel that the deer is still alive, doesn't bother me as much as we're not going to find every single one, but when that deer is dead or the deer is going to die, and we're not able to find it, it just got pushed too far. Those are the ones that kind of they frustrate you, but you got to have a short memory, right? Because as long as I feel, and I don't give up, and that's probably I've been told that I do track too long. There's times where 3 hours later I'm still tracking.
I've been there. I don't do it anymore.
I still, I want to give it 2,000% while I'm out there. If I feel there's a chance, then I do. There are times where I'll pull the client aside and I'll say, "Hey, look, this is what I'm seeing. Your deer's not dead," but the client always has the call. I never make the call. I just tell them what I'm thinking at that point, and if I feel the deer is still alive, I always tell them, look, you're going to see it again on camera. And we get a lot of confirmations back. And I love it when a hunter, sends me a text and says, hey, he showed back up on camera. So those are fantastic. It's always the ones that don't show back up on camera that, you kind of wish you knew, but and
we kind of talked about that last week, and one thing that some of us has learned is most of the time the hunters are not going to call you and let you know, no matter how much you ask. So it's always good to save their phone number and reach back out to those people a few weeks later. Hey, did that ever show up on camera? And I'm very fortunate with my current dog. If the deer's going to live, she comes up and jumps up on everyone. So it makes it easy. And I just tell the hunters before we even track, hey, if she does this is what this means. But I've had dogs in the past that gave no real indication that the average person could read.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be difficult to have that conversation with the hunter. Because for one, they can't understand, how does this dog know? So that's honestly what led me into, deep diving into the scents on the trail and, how everything works, the Jacobson organ, the pheromones, the dander, all that. Because once you start explaining that to the hunters, they have a more understanding. And, like you, I do ask some questions. I don't put a whole lot of faith into that hunter interview. I don't put a lot of faith into anything, not even blooded anymore. To a degree, because, there's so many times where lethal shots will be bright red, muscly looking blood. So, I still go, but what I will do is, if let's say they describe a back whack, I'll tell them, hey, it's about a 98% chance that we're not going to get this one, but I'm going to come and we're going to give it our all if you want us to. But I kind of set the expectations from the start.
Yeah.
And I found that helps, and that shortens the tracking time.
Yeah, it certainly does, because you already have a buy-in, right? and they know right up front and say, hey, look, I'm just telling you right now, I don't think your deer's dead, but you know what? If you say yes, I get it, because I was there myself.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
That's where I put that empathy, and I said, look, I don't think he's dead, but we're gonna come out and we're gonna track this thing as though he is. So we want to give it our. But to your point, Kenny, I think then the client understands, right? So when it comes time to have that conversation, he's like, well, I kind of knew this was coming. Yeah, at least he prepped me up ahead of time. I'm never gonna tell a client, oh, this is a dead deer, we're coming. Never want to tell them that. I say is the likelihood, if everything goes right, that we'll find your deer. And did you track it, and when did you jump it, and how far out were you? Again, those all play into that picture that I'm trying to develop in my mind as to shot placement. How far should he have gone? But man, we have tracked those dead deer a long way before we finally get them. It's like, goodness gracious. But it really lends to myself as a tracker, how I appreciate these animals, their will to live. They're just, I'm in awe every time we get an opportunity to track them. So their will to live is second to none.
I agree completely.
That's for sure.
So what's your favorite track? Your most memorable favorite track?
My most memorable, boy, Dave and Celine finding that one on his log jam is hard to beat. Shane's was great in that Manchester area, where I was able to use some of what I know and found his deer. There is one more. Got a call from Dave down in Morenci. We showed up for the track, and this is kind of a funny scenario. So those that know me, I'm not a big fan of heights. So down there, I think it's Bear Creek that's down there in Morenci. It's a river. Okay. It was mislabeled. It's not a creek. It's a river. And it's not tremendously deep, but it's deep enough where if you go across, it's gonna be kind of mid-thigh deep. Anyway, so they have this bridge. So Dave has this bridge that goes across this river. It's about 24 inches wide. It's suspended off this river by about 20 to 25 feet. It's about 60 to 70 feet long. And we get up there, and Dave looks back at me, and Dave's a triathlete. To say this guy's in shape is an understatement. And so he gets there, and we get to this bridge, and I'm looking at this bridge, and I was thinking, oh boy, I ain't walking across this. I said, you guys walk across this? And he says, yeah. And I said, well, I'll get across there, but I ain't walking across there because I'm afraid. And keep in mind, I got my wife with me, but this is before we had So Dave says, you want me to take Hunter across? And it's got the planks where there's probably 4 or 5 inches in between the planks, right? So there's this space. I said, well, I can't let Hunter go across because Hunter's, foot's going to go through there. And, so Dave says, well, I'll carry him across. Keep in mind, he's a triathlete. So he's the guy that does the 2-mile swim, bikes 120 miles, and then runs 26 all in the same day, right? And he does this just for fun. So he says, I'll carry Hunter across if you want. And I said, well, that's the only way he's getting across unless we just kind of wade across the river. He goes, yeah, no. So he picks Hunter up, across the bridge he goes. I look at Linda, and she looks at me, and we're both on our hands and knees crawling across this thing. But we got across there. And so we get to the hit site, we start tracking this deer. It came out of this woods, and it was into the CRP section. The CRP was really, really high. And wind was really blowing, and he went across this mowed path. So Hunter really had to sort out where he crossed the path and where he entered the CRP. But we got into the CRP, and this is a full 24 hours plus after the track, and we jump a live deer. And So I seen 4 or 5 beds, and they all had blood in it. I was really encouraged. And then we jumped this deer, and he turns around, and he runs right past us, and off he goes. And so I turn with Hunter, and Hunter's wanting to take off after him, and I'm trying to hold him back, and I'm trying to see as far as I could see through the CRP field. How far did he go? And at about 200-300 yards, I can't see him anymore. And so I'll never forget. Dave's dad looked at me. He says, "Well, now what?" And I said, "Now what? What?" He said, "Are we done?" I looked at his dad and I said, "Oh no, we're just getting started." And I said, "This is a one lung live deer." And he says, he goes, "You're not done?" I says, "No, we're going after it." So we jumped this deer 2 more times. We got pretty close. Anytime you're jumping live deer and you can shorten that window, right, where you can get closer and closer to them, you know that, the end is near. But after the second time we jumped this deer, we got real close. He takes off and he goes down this ravine. He's kind of headed back towards the river, and he ends up just expiring at the end of this hill. Dave ended up having to come in just to dispatch, but he was on his last leg anyway. He had lost so much blood after, and this was just the one lung. But that track in particular, Kenny, really stands out to me because we had tracked it almost 1 3/4 mile. And that was the 3rd deer that we had ever one lung ran down on lead.
Wow.
That I was pretty proud of. And I'll never forget his dad said to me, he says, "You weren't kidding that you weren't done." And I said, "Oh, I had no intentions of stopping," only to find out that earlier that year they had another tracker come out, tracked a deer, wasn't there 20 minutes, said, "Up, your deer's not dead, pay me." And that, and I said, "Well, I'm not that kind of guy." So I said, and it was great. It was great to meet him. There's a little more to the story, but that was one that really stands out as don't give up. When you got a good feeling that deer's dead, all the sign from the blood that I was seeing, I knew it was lung blood. And I knew we had a really good chance of, especially after we got in that CRP and I found 3 or 4 more beds with blood in it. I thought, man, and I always say there is no bad blood because anytime you're finding blood, that's good. But it was the amount, right? You start to see the amount and you're thinking, okay, now this deer's losing as far as volume, much better volume. So you always know that, it's going to take 2 3/4 to 3 pints for him to go down and stay down. But those are the ones when you finally catch that deer that really, again, make it all worthwhile, but makes you proud of the effort, and your dog. And like I said, my wife's been on there's only been just a couple of tracks that she hasn't been on. So she's been through the thick of it, just like Hunter and I. So yeah, that one really sticks out as, don't give up, trust your dog, give them the opportunity to work and sort things out. I'm never in a big hurry. However long it takes. And so I give Hunter as much time as he needs to sort through. In our testing, Al Sherman, UET judge, he was judging me. And afterwards, I always, hey, if there's, bring me the criticism. I'm willing to, that's how we learn, right? We learn by some of the mistakes he make. And Al said, while you talk more to Hunter than any tracker I've ever met, he said, you talk to your dog more than any tracker I've ever met. He said, look, I'm telling you right now, it works for you and it works for Hunter. So don't stop what you're doing. And I know a lot of guys, when they come out, if there's any young trackers on this podcast, here's one of the advices I'd give you on a track. And because I've heard stories on other guys, your vibe and your optimism on a track, your positivity, that dog can feel it. He can sense it. He can sense frustration. He can sense when you're dejected. I always stay positive. I'll always tell Hunter, work it out, sort it out. that positive reinforcement to the dog lets them know that, okay, Dad's still with me. He's believing in me. But dogs can sense your frustration, and I've heard stories about I've actually taken calls from trackers where they're upset, and I said, stop that, because the dogs pick up on that. So I'm always big on that, stay positive on those tracks, even if you don't feel that you're going to come up with, stay positive, because the dogs feed off that energy.
We see it a lot when we're judging dogs. You see a person, they start feeling down, or they're too nervous, and it transfers right to that dog.
100%. And if you give up, the dog's already given up. When you're kind of looking around and you're moping around, you're totally disengaged from your dog. They pick up on that. So yeah, I'm constantly, I'll give Hunter as much time, and I'll give Scout as much time as it takes for them to sort something out, to sort through it. Even if I'm not seeing the sign, I trust them. I know their ability of their noses, which again is something that you can't train. They either have it or they don't. But the ability of the dog's willingness in how he tracks is something that you gain. The more tracks you do, the more you trust them, the more effort they put in. You just build that relationship over time.
Experience is the best teacher, and repetition is the mother of all skill.
Oh, 100%. And I know, Matt, you've probably heard me say this, and I've had other guys. And what was not obvious to me early on as a tracker became more evident over time. So Rob Miller, who I have the highest regard for when it comes to tracking, he's found more deer than I ever will.
So you cut out there.
Sorry.
We didn't hear who you're talking about.
Rob Miller.
Gotcha.
Rob Miller. So the first year we tracked, I tell we tracked 19. Linda looked back in the records, and actually she said we were somewhere around 12 or 14. The very first year that we went live within the network, shoulder shots. So we were over 14.
I remember you told me that.
But I can tell you this, Kenny, as a fact. That was our first year tracking. We were over. It seemed like 1,000, right? Because it seemed like every track we were going on was a shoulder shot and a non-recovery. But we didn't find our first deer until I think November 4th. We got a call on a gut shot, and I about wanted to do a backflip. I didn't even know how to react when I got the call. I said, "Well, geez, how long do I wait? We never tracked before." So I didn't know how long to wait. I was so excited. We ended up finding that deer, but it was. Rob said to me, he said, all those shoulder shots you took that very first year has made you the team that you are. To never give up, to keep trying, just keep tracking. Learn, look at it as opportunities to, for you to learn your dog and your dog to learn you. And quite honestly, as I look back, what's obvious to someone else wasn't obvious to me at the time, but he was 100% spot on. It really did help us be the team that we are today.
Yeah, I see online all the time people giving the advice, oh, you should screen your calls. You want a young dog to be successful. And, well, I don't measure success based on a recovery. I know a lot of people does. Some of the best learning experiences and the best dog work I've seen has been on non-recoveries.
Yeah. Oh, it's some of the best dog work, absolutely, non-recoveries.
Yeah.
Even in my short career, I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's when you get to that point where you and your dog really become that team. You hear it when you're watching sporting events, right? Those successful teams are the clubs that, the Broncos, Western Michigan just won the NCAA hockey championship. All I kept talking about is the team, the guys playing as a team, and you and your dog, you're with as small as your team is, that's the team, and you're there to help and support each other, and So I think it goes a long way to breeding success as far as tracking and building that relationship that you and your dog have. So
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So Matt, you want to take some comments?
Yeah, there's a couple here that we'll throw back to. I think this one goes back to the taser comment. Andrew Bird, just curious, are some states legal for this? And I believe because that came in when we were on the taser conversation.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was that or dispatch.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. So in Michigan, hunter dispatch is legal. Tracker dispatch is not. Alan, have you done what do you know about the taser element?
So I have, I won't use their names or their counties where they're at, but I've tracked for a handful of clients who are conservation officers here in the state of Michigan. All of them had no problem with me carrying it. I jokingly say, so Kenny, when I put it on, so when I get there, I put my boots on and I put my taser on. And initially they'll say, hey, is that a taser? And I say, yeah, I carry that for unruly clients. And we all and we kind of get a chuckle. I try to keep a straight face while I'm saying that, but all of them have said, that look, I'm not going to shoot him. Right. So when we're out there, they understand up front. It's merely to protect myself and my dog. I have gotten no negative comments back from any of the conservation officers we track for. So
you're tracking for law enforcement who knows you have a taser, and none of them said, "Hey, bro,
nope,
no can do."
Not one. In fact,
so I got to ask, what does it do to a deer?
So you've seen some of the training videos where officers actually have to be tased themselves, they got two guys on each side and they get tased and they scream and go down. Without the screaming, that's exactly what happens with the deer. So he completely locks up and tips over. So there's that. So the pulse on mine, which is a law enforcement grade taser, so it's 50,000 volts. So once it does engage the deer, it locks them up, takes them on a side, and gives the opportunity to then move in. So the client can then move in to dispatch more safely, more ethical. And so it's a safer environment for both myself. I typically will have the dog tied up at that point, but for myself and the hunter to dispatch at that point. So, but it locks them up. Just like anybody you've seen, locks them up and right down on their side, so the hunter can then move in for a much more controlled dispatch.
Interesting.
How long do they stay incapacitated, Alan? Can you squeeze the trigger again and reignite it? Or
yeah, so as long as the tangs, and trust me. So if an officer ever tells you, halt or I'm going to tase you, halt and take his word for it. 'Cause you don't ever. So the prongs on them are like a fish hook. So they look just, the ends of them, they're straight, of course, that comes out of the probe. They're about 3/8 long. So that actually goes through into the hide and actually sticks into the animal. So, and then on the end of those probes are the leads that go back to the taser. But yes, it's a 5-second pulse. And you can pull the trigger again to pulse it for another 5 seconds. Okay. So the initial one, so you can dispatch. So you pull the trigger, the cartridge then deploys, hits the deer. He'll go down on the side again, 5 seconds. At that point, he's disorientated, like that didn't feel good. Then you can pulse it again, and that's when the hunter and yourself can move in for a much closer and a much more controlled. And before that scenario even happens, you go over that scenario with the client, let them know, I'm gonna tase him. He's gonna go over. I'm gonna pulse it a second time. So when you hear me say go, we're gonna move in slightly after the first, and then move in for the final pulse.
I could have used that one time last season when when we came up on one at 10 hours. It was still alive. Not much, but it was alive enough to try to stab the hunter back with his horns, and I was in a hurry before work and didn't tell him he could take his bow, and it got pretty primal, and I didn't like it a bit. And ever since then, Alan, I've thought about your taser,
It
was for a police officer too. Now that I think about it,
I gotta say, this is the first time I've heard of taser. I'm intrigued by this.
I am too.
I was sold when I heard about it. I didn't hesitate. I said, but I didn't want to just buy an El Cheapo model. I said, I definitely need one that's law enforcement grade. Was able to get one. So there's a company down in Florida that does sell them, and I swear by it. I swear by it. I've seen what it can do, and at the end of the day, every one of us that track deer, believe it or not, we're responsible for the safety of not only ourselves, our dog, but the clients themselves. Right. So, and it's merely meant to keep, everyone safe, in that scenario. Cause as you mentioned, Kenny, it can get kind of hairy, even during archery season, it can get hairy. So,
I've had some people that I needed to use that on.
Well, I think you stepped away, but I'll often say that as I'm putting it on, the clients will ask me, "Is that a taser?" And I say, "Yeah, I carry that for unruly clients."
My Payne just said, "I still think it's a good way to keep the hunters in check."
And you'll get the like, is he serious? And but
one way to find out.
Yeah. I know. Yeah, I would never want to be on the receiving end.
Yeah, some of those belligerent drunks, it'll sober them up real quick.
So that brings us. I'm going to jump all the way down, and then we'll go back up, Kenny, on these comments. But that brings old buddy Calvin. Did you see that? I see a new portion to the Michigan event. Matt is volunteering to be the deer. Kenny, you can tase him. Alan, I hope you're planning on coming to the event. If not, that's okay. But no pressure. Don't let me pressure you into doing the right thing and coming to the Michigan event on June 28th. But bring your taser. Apparently, Calvin's volunteered to get tased.
So what's the name of the company in Florida?
Kenny's in Florida, Alan.
I stumped him.
Yeah, no, it's right on the tip of my tongue.
Alan, is it the brand name of the taser?
No, well, the taser I carry is an X26. So,
so it won't be on the. Because you sent me a picture, I was just going to look and see if it was on there.
Yeah, so it's an X. Let me see. I'm doing this as we talk, so you can.
Joe Tenney said, "Finally, a reason for me to buy a taser." Tax write-off.
Well, so I'll tell you, it's Accredited Safety is the name of the company.
Okay.
Accredited Safety. That's who I get them from. So I can tell you though, when I did get it, you're going to laugh even harder at this, Kenny, because the officer that sold me that taser said, "All right, look, you're going to have a few of your friends come over. You're going to have a few drinks, and somebody's going to bring up a stupid idea because they know you have a taser, and they're going to say, 'Go get it and tase me.'" He said, "Don't do that." He said, "Number one, you're going to lose a friend, and number two," he said, "it hurts like you know what." So he said, "Refrain from anybody volunteering to get shot." He said, "It's extremely painful." So he said, it's law enforcement grade. He said, "You'll lose a friend real quick." So it, after seeing the probes, and how far they go in, I would never raise my hand or volunteer to take a shot. So,
but one thing in all seriousness, and I am very intrigued still by the whole taser thing, especially now that you've had law enforcement not have an issue with it. Yep. But statistically, there is a reasonably high failure rate on those in the law enforcement world, and that's why they'll use them, but they always, as a non-lethal force, but they always have lethal force backup because there is such a high failure rate.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I don't know. I still think it's great, and you can do it much more controlled unless you're trying to stop a charging deer, I suppose. But
yeah, these X26s, again, the one that I use is law enforcement grade, but there's a check sequence that you can go through when you start it up. So the biggest failure rate is within the connection on the battery. Not that this is turning into a taser podcast, but it goes through like a self-diagnostic when you first turn it on. So during the season, I'll check it probably twice during the season. And you can, as long as you take the cartridge out, you can pull the trigger, and you've already seen them. The two prongs will arc against, across each other in a sequence, and just the mere sound of it will scare the life out of you. But they, so there's when you take it out of safety, and all the tasers have a laser on them as well. So you have an idea of where you're going to hit based on where the laser ends up. But the check sequence that it goes through, it checks the continuity, it checks battery content. So I don't want to say they're fail safe, but pretty close to being fail safe on the initiation of them. And if you go through a check sequence, probably a couple times during the tracking season, they're pretty fail safe.
And I guess the failure that I heard and read about is not necessarily in the, not the taser deploying, but just the prong engagement. If you don't get both prongs engaged, you only get one. You're not,
it's not as effective.
Yeah.
I can tell you that removing the prongs, man, you got to pull hard, because that's a serious barb.
Yeah.
It's a serious barb.
Nice.
So, I was sold on it, and I'll continue to carry mine. And it's a great non-lethal means of just putting a bad situation in a more controlled situation. So
there are two times I could have easily used it, and one would have been a much safer and pleasant recovery in this match. The other one would have been a recovery in general. What's that, Kenny?
I just like things getting a little Western.
No, not me. So we'll get to some more taser comments in a minute here, but let's hit on this one because this could spark some conversation too. Have you gone over how to introduce your dog to gunfire recently? This would be a great topic to discuss.
Wow, that is a great topic. I make no bones about it. I've been called out to a couple of tracks. I know the locations of where they're at. So Hunter was kind of ruined as a pup. We had our property up north. Long story short, we were up there for the 4th of July. And basically a guy who had commercial grade, we're basically setting him off, right above our property. And Hunter does not like gunfire, doesn't like gunshots. If we get out and there's gunshots, he's done. When I say he's done, I mean he'll want to go back to the truck. Done.
Not having it, huh?
No, what doesn't. And so we've been out, we've tracked in the Hillsdale area near the college. And I've told guys, if I'd rather come at night, because I know there's no gunfire at night and we'll be good to go. But if they insist on during the day, I'm fortunate enough where I've got 2 dogs. Scout could care less. You could discharge a firearm right next to him. He won't. Just kind of look at you like, what's that? So I've got the best of both worlds now. I've got 2 incredible dogs, one that doesn't like firearms, and the other one could care less. And I've used them both on a track last year where 3/4 of the way through, long story short, some guys stepped out on this deck, boom, 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 and Hunter was done. Fortunate enough, Linda had Scout. I said, switch dogs. I grabbed Scout. He got picked up right where Hunter left off, and we ended up jumping a live deer. So fortunate enough to have 2 dogs just for that scenario. But, I know when gunshots go off, he doesn't like it. He's done. So, and there's nothing I can do. I've tried to introduce him to a gun range. I mean, he could hear his shots way off in the distance. A lot of times if he's on the track and he's really tracking hard and it's off in the distance, he'll discard. It's when they're closer. That's, it's not good. So it's a great question. Again, I'm fortunate enough. I've got 2 dogs, one that doesn't like them and one that doesn't care. So I can run and grab either one.
So we get a lot of dogs in. People have either ruined them or they just didn't do anything and the dogs are terrified. And it's most times something has caused that, and it can be a royal pain to overcome, but it really can tough. Be, but if you're going to introduce your dog to gunfire, don't shoot over your dog's head. Don't pull out your 300 Win mag. I recommend start off with, the little kids, little cap guns, the little paper. I'm talking about. Start off with one of those low sound. Don't point it at them. I even like for someone, either preferably you, to pet your dog, love on your dog while someone else just pops it off without them even realizing it.
Yeah.
Make it a positive thing. And, and then go up from there. A lot of people, they just want to start with a 22 pistol. 22 pistol is loud.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they're sharp. They're pure. Yeah.
Sharp. Yeah. It's, if you are going to use a 22, use a rifle, but for safety, they got the pop guns for waterfowl training. There's different scenarios, but you want, like it, just like in collar conditioning, you want to start low, work your way up. So never shoot over the dog's head.
I read on a post, someone posted about dog being gun shy. And this guy I thought this was interesting. The guy said the way he worked through it with his dog is he went to the local gun range, just sat in the car with the windows up with the dog. And every time the gun went off, he'd give the dog a treat. Dog would calm down. So then a little while later, however long a little while is, he'd roll down the window, bang, a little bit louder, give the dog a treat. Dog got comfortable with that. Then pretty soon he stepped outside of the car with the dog, give the dog a treat, just progress that way. I thought, well, that's an interesting way to do it. I might try that because she's gun shy, and I've never had to dispatch the firearm with her, and I don't want to.
Yeah.
Typical bloodhound.
Which is another reason why I carry the taser, right? If I ever have to dispatch, I don't know what Hunter what he would do, being that he's on the end of the lead. So, your other alternative is
you dispatch that taser, I'm going.
He's gonna go put the friggin' knife in his teeth and take his big sticker and go.
They are pretty cool, but I would tell, if a guy, does have a dog, that is, a bit gun shy, I would say, maybe run him more at night, until you could try to come up with a scenario to introduce him, at a later date, but, at a later time, or get another year on the dog if he's a younger dog. Just run your tracks at night. So I've got clients that are down by Hillsdale, which is out towards your way, Matt. And I tell them, if you're at your Hillsdale property, I just got to run it at dark. That's all. I'll just wait till, or I'll bring Scout. Which one do you want? Yeah, and I got clients that'll call up and they want Hunter. They want Hunter only. Okay. Well, if I know it's near a range, I'll have to tell them. Okay, we'll run it at dark. No problem. I don't care how many hours it is. I can run it at 20. I can run it at 30. He can run a hot track. He can run a cold track. It doesn't matter. So, and both, I've got that flexibility both with Scout and with Hunter. They can hot track. They can cold track. So putting more time on it for me is not a big deal. So,
yeah. Just real quick here, Gene Ferris says Ricky Wood said it best. When the moment you give up on your dog is when the dog gives up on you. Just going back to that, that relationship and that that dog just feeding off your energy. It's a real thing, man. And the I was going to bring it up. I was at the Missouri event a few weeks ago, and I was talking to somebody who took a UBT1 test, and wasn't successful in the terms that he left there with a ribbon. But he got some good feedback, and he said, and this guy is a dog trainer. Well, different genre of dog stuff, but he said I was just so nervous, and he says my dog could tell. He says the dog just kept looking at me and say, "Are you okay, Dad?" And he says he just knew. Yeah. Well, it's a real thing, and Alan, if you're listening, I'm wondering, that could be some of what's going on with Lucy. It's tough to fight those. I've been through it. I believe there are two emotions you need to get through life: joy and rage. I have, and that's not, of course. And when it was going early on, I got frustrated a lot in my practice. And I'm much better now that I'm more experienced and just understand it better, but it's hard early.
Yeah. I think, look, and Kenny, I know you appreciate this. There's no magic pill into training a dog and getting a dog that can really track consistently and really track well. It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of hard work. And I tell guys all the time, look, this is not an exact science. Okay. It's not like I can sit here at my computer, type in a scenario, and this is how it's going to go. I wish it worked that way, but it does not. So to say the knows comes that trust. And like I said, I trust both of my dogs. To say I trust them 1,000% would probably be underscoring how much I trust them. And for me, I can then be as confident as I am when I take either one out. It's interesting, the two different styles, because they track similar but different. Scout's more methodical, and Hunter's just kind of like nonchalant, like, yeah, I got this. Like, yeah, this steer step.
The old bat, whatever, Dad. Here we go.
Huh? Yeah, and then he gives me body language that says, "Oh, this is we're on a live deer." He'll give me little indications like, we're gonna jump a live deer here soon, and sure enough, like, here we go. So
Alan, Kenny, I don't want to derail your question, but you said you let the hunter call the track, and so my question is, like Kenny's dog Dixie when he just said when she knows the deer's not dead and the pheromone's gone, she's done, and she comes in. What does Hunter do? I mean, will he continue to track, or does he finally just say, "Dude, this is enough, man"?
Right. So Hunter will go into grid search mode, and he'll advance a little bit, and so I can tell he's problem solving, but he's searching desperately to pick up anything. What's amazing about him is that he'll advance a little bit. When I tell you, he'll come back to that exact spot. A lot of guys will say, "Oh, did you drop a pin on your Onyx, when you have last blood?" I said, I don't need to. Hunter will actually restart himself to where that last blood is. I don't care how far off to the right or left or advanced.
Brew will too.
He finds it every single time. I know when he gets into that mode, and I can really look at my Onyx because it looks like a plate of spaghetti on there, right? Where he's ruled out all those areas. And I'll let the client know on those, could go either way kind of calls. I'll say, we'll have that conversation if and when the time comes. But I can tell you when he's grid searching, I'm going to show him on my Onyx what we've covered. And I can pretty much,
do the same thing.
A lot of times I'll show him, my Onyx, I'll say, well, I can tell you where your deer's not. And so you can tell when he gets into that grid search mode. And then a lot of times they'll say, well, yeah, you did tell me about this. You did warn me about it. And just with the advice that I'm giving him, with what I'm being able to demonstrate and show him, I've never had a client say, no, let's keep going. So
sounds like we approach things very similarly, and I think probably most of us do. But I use the Garmin or the Onyx too, and say, look, see this straight line, and then we get here, and we can't get out of here, this is what's tracking. This means where the scent probably changed. And we're getting to the point where I can tell whether she's working through a grid searched area or where the deer has wandered around a lot to looking for the scent. There's just, I don't know how to describe it, but there's a difference between when she's working through scent and when she's looking for scent. It's just
one of the most common problems that we create with our dogs is by pushing the dog further than we need to.
Yeah.
If the dog is telling you, hey, we're not going to get this, and you keep pushing it to please a hunter, you are going to create bad habits. You are going to push them to off game, and you're opening a can of worms that you don't want.
Yeah. You're spot on, Kenny, because that kind of pigtailing off of that thought process. I'm a big believer during the season, and we all know when the rut comes, right? My call volume goes from anywhere between 6 and 7 on a weekend, 7 or 8 on a weekend, to 30 a day, right? So we know that the rut's here, and everybody, of course, wants you to come out. Any new trackers out there, here's what I'll caution you. I'm fortunate enough. I'm pretty much going to stop before my dogs have to. Just because my age, and I can only go so far. But I equate it to when you're tired. There's a reason why they only play NFL football games on Sunday, because the athletes need time to rest. And I'm not talking about you have to rest your dog, for days. But when you're out in the field, you got to hydrate, keep your dogs hydrated, keep them sharp, keep them fresh. Because by the time the rut gets there, you've run enough tracks. Your dogs are seasoned. They're in really good shape. But I will caution that guys continue to take excessive amounts of tracks during the rut, and your dogs need to rest as well. You can, I can tell when Hunter's getting tired. When if we're walking out on a track, he's jumping over a log that might be 3 feet tall. When we come back, he'll look for maybe a section of that log that's not 3 foot off the ground. Right. He'll still attempt to jump, but I can tell by the way he's working that he's getting tired. I think you can overwork your dogs, and when your dogs are tired, they're not thinking as clearly. They're not they're not processing, right? That because Hunter, when Hunter's on it and he starts sniffing and he starts huffing, so he's smelling and tasting at the same time, and he kind of sounds like a pig. You get that, and he's tasting, and when he gets into that mode, man, I just light up. I was like, oh yeah, it's on right now, right? Because now he's smelling and he's tasting like, well, we're good to go. But there's times where if you work them too much or you run them too much and they start getting tired, they can make mistakes. So that's another thing that I think new trackers just need to be aware of. On their dogs, the dogs are in great shape, but keep in mind if they get tired, they get run down, or they get dehydrated. Like I said, thank God for Linda, because she carries water out in the field for both for me and the dogs. and I'm fortunate because Kenny, as I mentioned, I don't, other than my taser, I really don't carry any of that in my phone. I don't have to carry anything. She carries it for us, but keeping the dogs hydrated.
My fellow trackers that tag along with me, some of them, they go nuts because I don't take anything.
Yeah,
I don't take water. Half the time I don't take a flashlight. I mean, I will at night if I know I'm going to be. But I should when it starts getting around 2-3 o'clock. I should probably take a flashlight with me. But I take as little as possible. And even a firearm. I mean, I take a small one I could slip in my pocket if I even take one. I may just take a knife if I take that. It's. I hate having a bunch of stuff. And as far as water goes, we're in the swamp so much. I mean, there's water everywhere. So
for a dog, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So Alan, I don't know if
if I get thirsty enough, I'll drink the swamp water. But
Kenny's in North Florida, Alan. I don't know if you knew that. That's where
I did.
Yeah, he's in North Florida.
Right on.
Yep.
So he wasn't wearing a t-shirt, but those of us here in the north were wearing our sweatshirts. So
it's been chilly here.
It snowed today. Yeah, it snowed a little today.
And here was 47 or something, Kenny, this morning. You said
46.
Oh my God.
Oh, that's brutal.
It probably is for Florida. Yeah, I get it.
Oh, we get in the teens. We will get in
Yeah.
the teens. It will be in the teens at night and like 80 during the day at times.
Oh,
That's a big swing.
Kill an ordinary man, Kenny, but somebody's got to do it.
Get that maple syrup flowing. So let's just put Larry Beckham. I wonder if they would frown me using it on my teenagers when they get out of line. Referring to the taser, Larry. I don't know who they you were referring to. Probably most of they would.
Well, I mean, the Garmin shot collars work miracles on my wife.
You got to train them, Kenny.
Yeah, I mean,
is Linda listening to this, Alan?
She might be. She's got the dogs in the other room. But I tell you, the sound of it would be a huge deterrent. To the kids. You could take the cartridge end off of it, and just the sound would deter them. So
yeah. But you got to do it once so they know what they're scared of.
Yeah. You do it once. Oh yeah, you have the greatest kids on earth.
Yeah. Terry says they work. He saw it firsthand.
The shot collar on his wife.
That's what I'm thinking. He's talking about poor Diane. Let's see. So, Alan, Joe Tenney talking about the taser again. Where do you carry it when you're walking?
On my hip. I carry it on my hip. So they offer.
There's like
correct. There's a holster for it. Yeah, and there's multiple different configurations. There's a couple different that I like, but yeah, your belt slips right through the holster, and so it's right there on your side.
Yep. I'm scrolling past it somewhere, but somebody asked, and just don't show us your check stub, Alan, but give us a window. Someone asked, what does a taser cost? A law enforcement grade taser. What's that window? What can someone expect to pay for one?
Yeah, so like the X26 that I have, you could buy it brand new, unused, right from the factory. They're $1,000. Unused. You can get reconditioned ones where they'll put a new battery in. Look, when you get it, it looks brand spanking new. I mean, when I say they're reconditioned, they're half that price. So I say very, very affordable if you're looking at the cost compared to a firearm. Carry a pistol. The only other thing that can get expensive on them, and this is the first year that I invested in buying they have a cartridge that's 30 I want to get it right, 35 feet. Yeah, it's 35 foot. So it's about 12 and a half, 13 yards. That cartridge, they can get expensive. If you buy enough of them, you can get them cheap enough. But I'll tell the clients right up front, if I have to discharge in a safe situation, the cost of the cartridge is X amount. And that cartridge, just one cartridge with the 35 foot, is $80. But I'll tell them that up front. If I got to discharge it, this is what unless I'm defending myself. I said if we have to use it in a dispatch type scenario. So I let them know up front. And I've never had one say, well, you might as well leave it here because I don't want to, I don't want to incur that. In fact, a lot of them are like, oh, I hope he's alive so we can see how this thing works. And I said, no, you don't. So, but I have found that it's really, it's safest for me, safest for my dog. I swear on, but yeah, that cartridge alone, and you can get shorter distance ones that aren't as expensive. But that one, I've gone to that one this year for a situation where I might have to dispatch just a few more feet. And I know that one's $80, and they don't give those away, but they don't give them away for a reason. So,
yeah. Brett Bryant, Alan, Brett says, Kenny, I think Calvin should get tased as well. Set it up on live. So Calvin, I guess we know what's going on at the Michigan event. Terry says Terry says the taser kept him from getting around. You know, Kenny, that we can just call it clickbait. That could get a lot. Hey, well, taser event at the Michigan event, and then Alan forgot his taser. It's Alan. Sorry, Alan, we can't do it. Sorry, guys.
I'm just glad I'm not the one being tased. It's you and Calvin's.
Yeah.
I tell you what, after seeing them how they work, there is, and this being again the one that I have, this isn't a toy, and there is no way ever a scenario I show up and an officer has one out, I'm going to do everything he tells me to do. I'm to the letter, because I would not want to be tased. Absolutely would not. It's just I've seen firsthand, and that's why I choose to carry one. Maybe they're not everybody's cup of tea, but and again, I have had to dispatch, so I've seen how it works, and I'm sold. So,
and Terry says it's one of when he had kept him from getting run over by a deer. Terry got run over by a big buck.
Yeah,
that happened to me the last deer I tracked this year. I got.
Yeah, I saw the video.
That's not fun. Yeah, Terry was a deer. Terry had actually turned me on to a guy that he had tracked for. That's why he said he had it done. And just as I ran through all the scenarios, I said, Terry, I gotta get hooked up with. I gotta get one. And I've since sold that one, and then got another one. So yeah, I'm sold 100 times over on this thing. So yeah,
well, certainly intriguing. Kenny, did you see a comment that I missed that we want to grab?
No, but I Alan, do you have any questions for us?
You mentioned earlier, Kenny, about this group and that group, and I went through. I jumped on the site today, and I love everything you guys stand for. And it's not what we do isn't quantity; it's quality. Right? We want it. It's not about for me anyway. It's not about how much when it comes to. I don't look at it as I always tell guys, look, you're not going to get rich doing this. And I know, and look, there are some guys, I get it. It's a part of their livelihood, and I totally get that. And those guys, work their tails off because it's a financial value stream for them and for their family. And I totally get it. For me, it's not. And so I try to give my clients quality over quantity, and certainly over price. I want to, and again, when I jumped on the site today and I seen that, as I think it was point number 6, I think, on your site, I could really appreciate it, because really it's about. I always say I do this because it's about giving back, but I get such a rush when we find the deer.
The guiding principles. You that's what you're referring to, isn't it?
Yeah, you got
See, Kenny, I told you, I just got goosebumps, dude. Kenny just posted those. We just worked through them. In all seriousness, that's some of the things that we've been talking about. A lot of the behind the scenes stuff with the ABTA. There's a lot of activity going on and a lot of great stuff coming out of it as the organization is really garnering some support, garnering some interest in it's starting to grow and really develop, and those guiding principles are something that we talked about, and I'm very big on them. I had a guiding principle list as a football coach. This is who we are. Every single thing we do, no matter what it is, you'll be able to point to one or all of these guiding principles, because if you can't, we're going to stop doing it. I'm glad, Alan. Thank you for pointing that out, because Kenny worked hard on that, and it just makes me feel good, man.
No, it is. It's extremely important. I know when I got into the Michigan Deer Tracking Network, and I basically this was several years ago. This was 8 years ago when we got into the network, and Dan and Angie clearly vouched for me to come into the network. Yep. Here's how I took it, and I could tell any young tracker the same thing. First of all, track every deer like it's your own. have a little empathy. Track that deer how you would want if you were paying for somebody to come out with their dog. How would you want that tracker to be? How would you want him to act? How would you want him to work? But I felt getting into the network that it wasn't just me that I was representing. It was at that time 45, 50 other trackers within the network.
Yeah.
I didn't only represent myself, but I represented them. So how I acted, how I conducted myself, how hard I worked out on a track was when they looked at, my name, and a lot of times, clients will never remember our name, right? They just get hold because they want you to find their deer. But when they have time to look at it, I'm representing more than just me as than hit 'em back. I'm representing the network. I got a hold of this tracker from Michigan Deer Trackers, and their dog couldn't find a food bowl if you put it in front of them, kind of thing, right? So that's why I didn't want to not only let my clients down, but I didn't want to let the rest of the network down. So if somebody refers a call to me, I'm not just representing myself, me and my dogs and my wife. I'm representing that guy who referred me.
Yeah.
So I show up, you're getting 1,000% effort because it's reflective of them. They stuck their neck out on the line saying, hey, this guy will do a good job for you. So it's there's a bigger picture, but I always tell guys, don't run your mouth, just run your dog, right? Just show up and track like it's the very last deer you're ever going to track, and just give that client everything you can, and that's what it's all about. It's about finding deer. It's about giving that, and you may not find the deer. Look, and I think back, and I'm laughing as I say this because if they hear this broadcast, Angie will remember the buck that I had them come track out, almost gored her, charged her and just missed her by inches. Almost ran over Gunner in the process. But my point is that, it gave me, did they find my deer? Yes. Was he still alive? Yes. But they told me up front that the chances are your deer's still, but that's okay. And I said, I still want you to come out. It gave me that peace of mind. And here we are today, and here I am on your podcast talking about tracking and
appreciate it.
So yeah, I appreciate them. Love them to death. And we've got 2 of their pups, and hope we've made them proud.
Scout deers too. You got Scout from. Scout from.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So Scout came from Gunner's last litter. In fact, Angie said this is going to be Gunner's last litter, and that's why I turned and looked at Linda and had to give her my Basset Hound.
Your own puppy dog eyes, yeah.
And I said, this is our last chance. I said, we either just track with Hunter till he's done and we're done, or because I think in our network, I want to say we're like the 3rd oldest in our network. So
probably
we'll just say, both Linda and I are we're over 60. So,
age wise. Oh, I thought I thought you meant the time in the network. You mean age
wise?
Okay.
Yeah. So, but yeah, we love it, and so it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. But Kenny, to your point, you asked me, do I have any questions for you guys? I thought those points were well timed, and I read those today, and I said, yeah, you guys are spot on. That's certainly an organization I think that a lot of people get their arms around and say, you know what, I'd like to be a part of that organization, or I like where they're going, I like where they're grounded. But just get your dog trained up. It's not complicated, but it can be tough. But
not complicated, but it can be tricky, right?
yeah. Just get out and all the prep work, right? All the training. If it was easy, everybody'd do it. And it's not. But boy, we have fun doing it.
For sure. Oh man, Alan, really appreciate it. Kenny, you see the comment there?
Yes, I just got a text.
Okay.
Boy, don't ever have that guy on again.
No, Alan. There's someone asking if Nick Green asks, is there somewhere I can take a lab to get trained professionally on tracking? Well, turns out that's
As a matter of
exactly what
fact,
he does.
yeah. Gosh, it just Matt, when you asked me to be on, and we were getting into it, and here I have this Basset Hound pup, and I'm thinking, what in the world? I have no idea how to train this thing to track a deer.
Yeah.
And I think back to when we first started. I mean, I was dragging a deer hoof on a rope. That's how
That's how I started.
I took a stick, tied a rope to the end of it, tied the deer hoof, and just walked. And that's how we started off. I mean, we've since graduated, and I've now got a pair of buck braid tracking shoes, and we can lay some a lot more professional tracks.
Yeah.
Right? But I think back, geez, started with a stick and a rope, tying a deer hoof on there.
Yeah, dragging around. Yeah, I did the same thing.
I mean, just hundreds of practice tracks to get us to where we are today. So it's.
Say repetition is the mother of all skill, man. You got to do it, and plus, it's just fun.
It is.
I just love watching the dog work. A problem-solving dog that is legitimately problem-solving. I just love to watch that happen. I just love it.
I've got at least a dozen VIP clients who call us out. They could care less whether we find the deer. They just want to see the dogs work. And I say, "Oh, well, I love you too."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, I just wanted to see Hunter. I say, "What am I, chopped liver?"
Yeah, no kidding.
But I totally get it. There's nothing like watching them work.
It's just awesome, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And when we have that time, and I like to break things down simplistically sometimes, I think, what in the world are they smelling?
Oh,
now,
yeah.
I had a guy who actually trains shepherds. Believe it or not, he's Michigan dog training in Plymouth, Michigan. And he trains law enforcement dogs. And he was telling me, he said, when he knew, we take them sometimes if we're going to be out of town, we board them there at Michigan dog training. And he told me, he said, do you realize there's one breed that has a better nose than Basset Hound, and it's the Bloodhound. And he said to me, he said, Alan, he said, let me give you a little idea on Hunter's olfactory system. He said, you could take your clothes off, throw it in the fire, burn that clothes in that fire, wait till the next day. Hunter could come out, smell those ashes, and still be able to track you on the ashes that were in that fire. And I looked at him and I said, no way. And subsequently, I've done some investigating, and I love this aspect of it, right? Learning. I love to learn all the time.
Oh, yeah.
He's not wrong. He was 100% spot on. So I often think, I'm watching these dogs work, right? And they're huffing and they're smelling and they're tasting. And what in the world are they smelling? To me, it's totally fascinating to me. Totally fascinating. And there's nothing like getting on a dead deer. You both know when you're on a dead deer, your dog knows that.
Oh, yeah. And that's why I love Kenny's presentation on the pheromones and the scent and all that stuff. We did that during our training segment. We did a whole session on a 3-part training series, a whole session on, in essence, the scent cocktail, the disturbed earth, the bacteria. That was a big one, Kenny. We talked about just everything. Broken vegetation starts to create bacteria. Blood starts to create bacteria. And pheromones, and just I'm fascinated by all that super nerd stuff. I love it.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, honestly, as far as number of scent receptors, a bloodhound and a basset have the same. But at the end of the day, do we need that many?
Yeah, to your point, right?
Realistically, for what we are doing, when you have such a broad spectrum of the varieties of breeds who are successful trackers, do we really need that?
Yeah. No, and to your point, right? You can train a dog on just about, and Mike has told me this. He's the guy that trains these the police dogs. He said the same thing. He said, look, you can train a dog to scent anything you want to work with him on. He said, if you want that dog to find candy, you can train him to find candy. Right. He said it just takes time and it takes repetition. he said, but yeah, he said, they can, he said, they'll quickly, in their mind, they'll quickly say, oh, this is what I'm supposed to track it up. And we know, yeah, when we get to that hit site and, we're on a liver gut or a gut shot and it's dead. It's like that dog gets there like, whoa, follow me.
Yeah.
I'm off to the races. Right? They don't miss a beat, but you think, man, is there really that big? There's that big of a difference. All right. There's that, like you call it, that scent cocktail, right? That's just coming off that deer.
Everything.
And
coming out of their nose and mouth.
And not to give it all away yet, but I will share this at the Michigan event. We did Larry Beckham, who is actually tuned in right now.
Yep.
We did a little training line with his dog that is pretty eye-opening when it comes to the whole scent cocktail, where we had dander, hide, not drug along. We had hide, we had blood, and we had hoofs going in a different direction from a deer that had been shot and ran a ways. Seeing the results of all of that and what took place, I will be playing this at the Pennsylvania and the Michigan event, and I'll share it at Iowa. Pretty eye-opening. Yeah. You're gonna have to go there to see it, because I'm not going to put it on here yet.
No, we're not. No, you got to go to the event to see it. But Alan, I've seen it a couple of times, and it's again, I got goosebumps. It's just fascinating stuff, man. So let me just grab this one really quick while it's here, because it's in the moment. Tony Hay says, absolutely, in reference to your burning things, right? When we man trail with the bloodhound, we went to many of seminars and used a 4x4 gauze to wipe a fishing reel. Burn the gauze pad, place the ashes in a Ziploc scented from the Ziploc is scented from it. We were able to successfully follow the track. That just that doesn't compute to me. And Kenny, I don't know if you noticed. I'm going to start with this opening sentence again. When we man trailed with a bloodhound,
that's where they need to stay.
I'm teasing, but in terms of what that's just amazing. But in terms of what we do tracking deer, and bloodhound have the 300 millions and Bavarians have the 230 millions or whatever scent receptors, I refer to it as a diminishing return. There comes a point where the more scent receptors don't help anymore. In terms of, I suppose you could argue, particularly when it's the pheromone and they're not using the scent receptors to sense the pheromones at the Jacobson's organ, so the scent receptors aren't a factor per se for the specific pheromone. But I suppose maybe if you got a really old line and we are more on some very depleted scent and disturbed earth or something, maybe the scent receptors of a bloodhound might, but generally speaking, I don't know.
I think then the terminates come more into play with that.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Right.
I said terminates. Terminates. The amplifiers basically. And Alan, I don't know if you know what we're talking about there, but if you have a skull mount deer, you look inside the nose, you'll see a little spiral.
Yep.
Cone. It basically amplifies the scent as it comes through, and the longer the turbinate is, the more it amplifies to that longer nose.
Just creates more surface area.
Yeah.
By all that spiral for the scent to adhere to. Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. I know. Sometimes I get way too in depth and too nerdy. And
oh, I love it, man. That's why I just love it. And it's funny because we're talking about the terminates, and right, and all the hunter knows. Can your dog find my deer? Can your dog smell? I don't care what it's smelling. Can it get me to my deer? Yeah, I can. We're like, well, the pheromone and this, and then the terminates, and they're like, can your dog find my deer? Yep. And we got a pretty good shot. If it's not dead, I don't know.
Yeah, he's got a good chance because he can find his food bowl every night. But I remember. So I've been over to South Africa many times, basically for business. But I've had the opportunity to hunt while I'm there. Well, you two know the kudu, right? The spiral horn kudu. right?
Mhm.
And you know how big their ears are, somewhere between 7 and 8 inches long. One of the PHs was telling me, and this goes into like the mystery of the animals that we have. When a kudu is on alert, their ears are going to be up, and if you've ever noticed like pictures of them, the ear will actually touch their horn,
Okay.
and the horns actually act as an antenna, because the horn on a kudu is hollow.
And they're resonating down.
It resonates down and into their
I'll
ear.
be damned.
So, it's funny that you mentioned that about the nose, but it's just one of the fascinations, when I was over there, it's like, no way. But, and no wonder they call them the gray ghost, and they're hard to see because of the fact that, they're using their horns as another means to be able to hear. But to your point, that colloquial spiral within the nose, just, our dogs are amazing. So they're amazing.
They sure are. Well, it looks like we probably we're kind of up against it. It looks like before we wind her down, Kenny Larry's asking me any update on a Georgia event. Do you know?
Not yet. I will try to get information. Trust me, if we have new info, we will share it. Right now, we're still trying to find out what's going on with the property. It took a lot of extensive damage from the hurricane. So,
yeah. Well, geez, Alan, this has been a ton of fun, and I knew it would be. You helped me a lot. In fact, we're in one of my early recoveries, my first year, one of my ever has your fingerprint on that deer that one of your clients, and you couldn't make it, and you referred him to me as a first year tracker. I was very flattered that you did that, and we found it. This fun story. It was still alive. My dog got loose, and oh my God, our state land. We got the deer, and I learned a lot. It was fun. But I too do genuinely appreciate your support of me personally, and in what you do for the Deer Tracking Network and trackers in general, the Michigan Deer Tracking Network. So it's good stuff, and I really do, and I mean it sincerely. Not because I'm just trying to stack up the event, but I truly hope you're able to make it to the event. Again, I joke about pressure, but there's zero. But it'd be a lot of fun. I think there's gonna be a lot of good stuff there, especially when we shot Calvin. So, so guys, I think we're there.
It could make its way into my truck. I'm just saying. I
I
think
have it in the truck
and available.
It could be a good show and tell session. We are going to have. The Jackson County COs there too. They said they would, so at least nice. One of them. They would probably like to play. So just whatever that means to you. But final comments, Kenny.
Yeah, I want to thank you for coming on, Alan, and giving us this very intriguing, in-depth taser.
Laser tutorial.
Tutorial. There you go.
Tutorial.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. But no. In all seriousness, we appreciate you coming on and sharing your experiences and your knowledge.
Kenny and Matt, appreciate both of you. Thanks for inviting me. And I hope there was a few takeaways for some guys here that
for sure
that can help them. So that's great. No, appreciate both of you. Thanks so much.
Well, sounds good, Alan. I forgot to cover this in our pre-show, but just when we stop recording, just hang on for a minute. So, all right, guys. Hey, I appreciate it, Alan. Thank you, Kenny. As always, man, great talking. Guys, thanks for the comments. And until Tuesday, guys, more of the good, less of the bad. We'll talk to you soon.